The night is still. The air feels heavy, almost thoughtful, as though the world itself is holding its breath. There is something quietly haunting about the idea of disappearance, of things and people that slip beyond sight, leaving behind no trace but the weight of unanswered questions. History is scattered with stories like these, moments where reality seems to falter and the known world fractures into mystery. It is in these fractures that imagination begins to glow softly, illuminating the space between what we can explain and what we can only feel. Across centuries, humanity has documented wars, triumphs, discoveries, but the vanishings, those are whispered. They linger not because of what we know, but because of what we never will. The mind returns to them at night, when everything is quiet, replaying the puzzle pieces that never fit. The calm rhythm of time can make us forget, yet some absences are too profound, too deliberate, to fade completely. They hum beneath history like a low, constant sound, something just beyond hearing, just beyond touch. Imagine standing on a deserted shoreline. The water glows faintly beneath a setting sun. Somewhere beyond that horizon, ships once sailed and never returned. Somewhere beneath that same water, voices are still echoing through the currents. The sea does not tell its stories aloud. It keeps them, as if to remind us that some mysteries must remain unsolved to retain their power. The ocean knows the art of silence better than we do. Perhaps that is why disappearances fascinate us. They exist on the border between the rational and the unknowable, where science stops and myth begins to take root. We invent explanations to soothe ourselves. Storms, accidents, human error, but these stories never feel complete. There's always a shadow left behind, something that refuses to be neatly categorized. Disappearance is, in its own way, a mirror reflecting our deepest fear. The fear of erasure, of vanishing from the narrative without meaning or remembrance. And yet, there's also a strange beauty in it. To disappear is to become eternal in mystery. The known can be forgotten, but the unknown endures. The people and places that vanish are suspended forever in speculation, half alive in every retelling. Like stars that have burned out, but whose light still travels to us. These stories flicker on, even after their endings have been swallowed by time. This documentary drifts through those vanished worlds, tracing the delicate line between history and myth. We will wander from empty settlements to abandoned ships, from lost explorers to missing civilizations. Each disappearance is a doorway into silence. Each silence a reflection of how fragile our presence truly is. We will not chase answers with urgency. Instead, we will move slowly, like mist rolling across forgotten ground, allowing the questions themselves to breathe. Because every disappearance is a kind of story, and every story is a map of longing. Behind each vanished soul or forgotten place lies a trail of emotion. Hope, fear, confusion, faith. The calm voice of history does not always speak through documents or artifacts. Sometimes it speaks through absence. The space where something once was can be more eloquent than any monument. So as the night deepens, let your mind wander through the corridors of the past. Imagine the faces we no longer see, the ships that drifted away, the footsteps that faded into snow. Let the rhythm of time carry you softly toward the first mystery, where an entire colony once stood and then did not. The calm of this journey will not bring resolution, only reflection. And in that stillness, perhaps, we will find not fear, but peace in the unknown. The story begins on the edge of a new world, centuries ago, when the Atlantic wind carried fragile wooden ships toward a wild and unknown shore. In the late 1500s, England dreamed of planting its first colony in the Americas, a foothold on the edge of mystery. They called it Roanoke, a name that once meant promise, now whispered through history as a riddle that refuses to fade. When those first settlers arrived, they found a land both beautiful and unforgiving. The forests were thick with whispering trees, the air damp with the scent of salt and pine. There were nights when the ocean murmured against the shore like an old secret, and mornings when the mist rose so gently that the world seemed to disappear in front of their eyes. The colonists built small homes, planted crops, and carved out a fragile life between the wilderness and the unknown. They were dreamers and survivors, but above all, they were alone. The sea that had carried them across the world now separated them from everything familiar. Supply ships were rare, communication slower than hope itself. Illness spread easily, food grew scarce, and winter crept closer with every sunset. They relied on the kindness of nearby indigenous tribes and the endurance of their faith. Yet even as they worked to shape a home, something in the air felt uncertain, as if the land itself was holding its breath, waiting. When Governor John White, the colony's leader, returned to England for supplies, he promised his family and the settlers that he would come back quickly. But storms and war delayed him for 3 long years. 3 years in which the colony was left to the mercy of weather, hunger, and perhaps something far more elusive. When he finally returned to Roanoke in 1590, the sight that greeted him was not one of joy or reunion. The settlement was empty, silent. Houses stood abandoned, roofs rotted by rain. The gates of the small fort were open, and there were no signs of struggle, no remains, no farewell notes. Only a single word carved into a wooden post, Croton. Another carving, shorter, on a nearby tree, just the letters CRO. The settlers had agreed before White's departure that if they moved, they would leave a message behind. But the carvings were both a clue and a question. Croton was the name of a nearby island, home to a friendly tribe. White tried to sail there, but fierce weather drove his ship away. He never found them. Centuries later, historians, archaeologists, and storytellers have returned to that moment, searching through time for traces of what happened. Some believe the colonists integrated peacefully with indigenous communities, leaving behind the life they knew for one that could survive. Others think disease or starvation ended them quietly, swallowed by the relentless land. Still others whisper of darker possibilities: abduction, massacre, or even curses born from the old superstitions that sailed with them from Europe. But perhaps the truth lies somewhere softer, somewhere more human. Imagine the fear of isolation, the desperation of waiting for help that never comes, the slow erosion of faith as days turn to years. In that vast wilderness, surrounded by unfamiliar voices and unrelenting nature, what choice would you have but to adapt or disappear? Maybe they didn't vanish at all. Maybe they simply changed, leaving behind only their name and their silence. Over the years, the Roanoke mystery has become more than a historical puzzle. It has become a mirror. Each generation projects its own fears and fascinations onto it. To some, it is a symbol of colonial arrogance, of dreams built on fragile ground. To others, it is a romantic legend, proof that the New World still held places untouched by reason. Theories rise and fall like tides, yet the stillness of that empty settlement remains unchanged. At dusk, if one were to stand on that same island, the air would feel heavy with memory. The rustle of leaves might sound like distant voices. The faint scent of smoke could drift through the trees, carrying the ghost of fires long extinguished. The waves would whisper the same word over and over, Croton, until it no longer felt like a clue, but a lullaby from the past. The power of Roanoke's mystery is not in its evidence, but in its silence. It teaches that history is not only written in what we find, but also in what we lose. The colonists were ordinary people, yet their disappearance transformed them into something timeless, symbols of humanity's fragile dance with the unknown. And so, the story of Roanoke lingers like mist, refusing to settle, refusing to explain itself fully. It is both fact and myth, both loss and legend. The calm voice of time carries it forward, whispering across the centuries as if reminding us that not all vanishings need to be solved. Some simply exist to remind us that mystery, like memory, is what keeps the past alive. As the wind moves softly through the pines and the sea continues its eternal rhythm, the story drifts onward to another disappearance, one that would not happen on land, but far out upon the ocean, where silence stretches endlessly and even the waves seem to listen. The ocean is calm, but not silent. Beneath its surface lies a deep, endless hum, an ancient song that has witnessed more disappearances than we can ever count. Among them is one of the sea's most enduring mysteries, the story of the Mary Celeste. Her name drifts through maritime history like a ghost, whispered by sailors who still believe that the sea remembers everything. It was December 1872 when a British ship, the Dei Grazia, spotted her adrift in the mid-Atlantic. The Mary Celeste, a fine American brigantine, was sailing strangely, her sails loose, her path aimless, her motion uneasy, as though guided by something unseen. The Dei Grazia's crew approached cautiously. From a distance, the ship looked sound, undamaged. But as they boarded, they stepped into a silence so profound it felt alive. The decks were wet, but there were no signs of struggle or violence. The cargo, over 1,700 barrels of industrial alcohol, was untouched. The personal belongings of the captain and crew were still neatly stored. Meals had been prepared, the ship's log updated only days before. Yet not a single soul remained on board. 10 people, men, a woman, and a child, had vanished into thin air. The lifeboat was missing, as were the ship's papers. But there were no storms recorded in the area, no wreckage, no trace of panic. The Mary Celeste drifted on, abandoned yet alive, caught between the world of the living and the deep. For more than a century, people have tried to fill that silence with explanations. Some say the cargo leaked, filling the air with explosive fumes that terrified the crew into abandoning ship. Others imagine a sudden waterspout, or a rogue wave that struck and frightened them into fleeing temporarily, only for the lifeboat to vanish in the endless blue. There are darker stories, too. Tales of mutiny, of pirates, of supernatural forces that creep through the fog. But each theory carries its own unease, its own gaps where logic fades and the unknown takes shape. The calmness of the discovery is what lingers most. The Mary Celeste was not wrecked or broken. She was simply empty. The ocean, wide and indifferent, cradled her gently as she drifted onward, as though carrying a secret she refused to share. The men of the Dei Grazia could only guide her to shore, baffled and uneasy, her silence echoing louder than any storm. Imagine what it must have felt like to step aboard her that day. The quiet sway of the deck, the creak of rope, the faint scent of salt and wood. Perhaps a chair moved slightly in the breeze, or a door swung open and shut. The ship was alive, yet lifeless. It was a vessel caught between presence and absence, between story and silence. It is in that uneasy balance that the mystery truly resides. For sailors, the sea is both companion and adversary. It nurtures and devours, gives and takes without warning. A ship like the Mary Celeste becomes a symbol of that duality, a reminder that even with all our navigation, all our charts and instruments, the ocean remains the ultimate unknown. Its moods shift like the wind, and its memory stretches beyond the reach of time. Over the years, the Mary Celeste became a kind of legend. Writers and journalists turned her story into poetry and superstition. She became the ghost ship, forever sailing on invisible tides, her lost crew whispered about in port taverns and stormy nights. Some said she reappeared at sea again and again, glowing faintly in the moonlight, the echo of her name carried by the wind. Others believed she was cursed, destined to wander until her story was understood. But perhaps the true power of the Mary Celeste lies not in its haunting, but in its silence. Her mystery is not loud or violent. It is quiet, patient, and eternal. The idea that 10 lives could vanish without a sound challenges something deep within us. It reminds us that control is an illusion, and that nature, vast and ancient, keeps its own counsel. In a way, the Mary Celeste is less a tragedy than a meditation. a reflection on the thin line between order and chaos. Every ship that leaves harbor carries within it the dream of return, and every sailor understands, deep down, that the sea does not make promises to those who spend their lives upon it. The Mary Celeste is a story of humility, of reverence for the water that sustains and swallows. In the soft rhythm of the waves, her name still lingers. Each ripple is a whisper from that day in 1872, when a ship was found complete and intact, yet utterly empty. It is as though the ocean took only the people, leaving the vessel behind as a question too heavy to sink. And as we drift onward through these stories of absence, the sea gives way to the sky, to mysteries that take flight, vanish into clouds, and leave no trace upon the water below. From ghost ships to ghostly aircraft, humanity continues to look up and ask, how does something so real simply disappear? The ocean fades into the horizon, and the story lifts gently into the air. Above the waves, another kind of mystery unfolds, one that belongs not to sailors, but to aviators. It is December 5th, 1945, and the world is caught in the soft quiet that followed the end of World War II. From a naval air station in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 5 U.S. Navy planes rise into a clear afternoon sky for what should have been a simple training mission. Their designation is Flight 19. Within hours, they will vanish entirely, swallowed, not by the sea or the sky alone, but by something far stranger, the space between certainty and the unknown. The flight consisted of 5 Avenger torpedo bombers, each carrying young men who had spent years in war, now returned to routine. Their mission that day was basic, a triangular navigation exercise over the Atlantic, a few hundred miles of flying to test skill and direction. The weather was mild, the aircraft fully functional, and the men experienced. At 2:10 p.m., they took off, heading east into the fading light. Nothing seemed unusual, but sometime after 3 o'clock, the voice of the flight leader, Lieutenant Charles Taylor, began to waver over the radio. His words were hesitant, uncertain. He reported that his compass wasn't working. The sea below looked strange, unfamiliar. The islands he expected to see weren't where they should be. "We are not sure where we are," he said. Other pilots reported similar confusion, their instruments spinning, their sense of direction dissolving. Radio operators on the ground tried to guide them home, but their transmissions crackled into static. The calm blue of the Atlantic had become a labyrinth, and the planes were trapped within it. As the hours passed, daylight began to fade. The men circled, unsure which way led back to Florida. Their voices grew tense, but disciplined, trained to hold composure, even as disorientation set in. Taylor's final message was weary, resigned. "When the first plane drops below 10 gallons, we all go down together." Then came silence. No trace of Flight 19 was ever found. Not a single plane, not a fragment of metal, not even an oil slick upon the surface of the sea. Even more haunting, the rescue plane sent after them, a massive PBM Mariner with 13 crew members, also disappeared without a trace. The ocean, calm and infinite, had taken them all within hours, leaving nothing behind but radio logs and unanswered questions. Over time, this single event grew into one of the most famous mysteries of the 20th century, feeding into the legend of the Bermuda Triangle, a vast, loosely defined region between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, where ships and aircraft are said to vanish under inexplicable circumstances. Some dismissed it as coincidence, a myth born of imagination and fear. Others saw it as proof that the Earth itself hides strange forces beneath its surface. There are, of course, scientific explanations. The region is known for sudden storms, magnetic variations, and unpredictable currents that can confound even experienced navigators. Methane gas eruptions, powerful downdrafts, or simple human error might account for many of these disappearances. Yet for every rational possibility, there remains the feeling that something deeper lurks beneath the statistics, a kind of silence that logic cannot explain away. The Bermuda Triangle became a symbol of the unknown, a space where the familiar laws of nature seemed to bend. For decades, it captured the imagination of writers, pilots, and dreamers. Books and films spoke of lost civilizations, time warps, even otherworldly abductions. And though such tales stretch the boundaries of truth, they reveal something genuine about human nature, our desire to find meaning in mystery, to believe that every vanishing holds a secret worth uncovering. Imagine standing on the tarmac that afternoon in 1945, watching the sun glint off the silver wings as the 5 planes disappeared into the horizon. You would not have guessed that you were seeing them for the last time. Somewhere out there, the sky and the sea were waiting, vast and unbroken. As daylight faded, the boundary between air and water blurred into one continuous expanse of blue. The pilots may have seen it too, that merging of elements, that quiet confusion between worlds. Even today, the coordinates of their last known position are marked on maps. But the ocean below remains indifferent, its surface smooth and endless. Searchers have combed the depths with sonar and submarines, yet the merry celeste of the air has never been found. What remains instead is a haunting stillness, a kind of peace that resists disturbance. The Bermuda Triangle's legend persists not because it defies explanation, but because it invites reflection. It reminds us that even in an age of satellites and science, there are places that do not yield their secrets. There are corners of our planet where the compass spins, the horizon blurs, and the line between fact and myth becomes as fragile as mist. Perhaps Flight 19 did not vanish at all, but merely slipped into another chapter of history's long conversation with the unknown. Every generation has its version of the triangle, those spaces where logic falters and wonder begins. The calm voice of a narrator would remind us that the sky, like the sea, is not an empty void, but a living mystery, vast, ancient, and beyond full comprehension. As the final echoes of radio static dissolve into silence, the story drifts once again from the skies above to the mountains below. There, in the frozen stillness of the Urals, another mystery awaits. One not born from ocean or storm, but from snow and fear, where 9 footprints fade into darkness and the wind whispers secrets no one can ever fully hear. The snow falls softly, soundless, and endless over the dark shoulders of the Ural Mountains. The air is thin, the cold absolute. It was February 1959 when 9 young hikers set out on an expedition into this white wilderness. They were experienced, strong, and full of life, students and graduates of the Ural Polytechnic Institute in the Soviet Union, seeking adventure and the thrill of testing themselves against nature. Their leader was Igor Dyatlov, a man admired for his discipline and calm. None of them could have known that their journey would become one of the most chilling mysteries in modern history, a story whispered even now in the language of fear and snow. Their destination was Otorten Mountain, a remote peak whose name, in the language of the local Mansi people, meant "don't go there." Yet they went, laughing, singing, carrying their sleds and cameras and notebooks. They documented everything, their meals, their routes, their smiles frozen in time on rolls of black and white film. For them, it was a test of endurance, not of survival. But nature, indifferent and immense, had its own story to tell. When they failed to return on schedule, search teams were sent into the mountains. What they found weeks later has never been fully explained. The campsite lay deserted beneath a blanket of snow. The hiker's tent was still standing but ripped open from the inside, as though its occupants had fled in panic. Their belongings, boots, coats, food, cameras, were left behind in careful order, untouched. The tracks in the snow told of barefoot steps, some in socks, leading away into the night. The footprints were calm, not running, as if the group had left quietly into the freezing dark. As searchers followed the trail, they began to find bodies scattered across the slope and into the trees. Some were found near a small fire, wearing little clothing, their skin marked with frostbite. Others were farther away, half buried in snowdrifts, their expressions unreadable beneath the ice. Then came the final, more disturbing discoveries. 3 of the hikers were found with injuries too severe to match any known accident. One had a fractured skull, 2 others had broken ribs, and internal damage described by experts as resembling the force of a car crash. There were no external wounds, no signs of struggle. One woman was missing her tongue. The official investigations struggled to explain what had happened. At first, authorities suggested a simple avalanche, yet the slope was too gentle and the tent's position did not fit. Other theories followed: paradoxical undressing caused by hypothermia, in which victims feel a false sense of warmth, disorientation, a sudden storm. But none of these could explain the violent injuries or why the group had fled without protection. Radiation traces were found on some of their clothing, and their skin, in later reports, was said to have taken on an unnatural tone. The world began to speculate, and soon, the Dyatlov Pass incident became a canvas for every imagination. Some said the hikers had witnessed secret military tests, parachute mines, rockets, or sound weapons that forced them to flee. Others spoke of UFOs seen in the night sky that winter, strange orbs of light hovering over the Urals. A few believed in more ancient explanations, that something unseen and old, a spirit of the mountain, had driven them away. The Mansi people told stories of sacred lands that punished trespassers, and though dismissed by investigators, such tales echoed with an eerie resonance. Through the years, scientists, journalists, and hikers have returned to that frozen valley, retracing the same path, feeling the same cold wind that once howled through the night of their terror. Modern theories lean toward a rare combination of natural phenomena: infrasound waves generated by a specific wind pattern that can cause panic and disorientation, or a delayed slab avalanche that collapsed part of the tent and sent them fleeing half-clothed into deadly cold. Rational, perhaps, yet the mind still resists. The unease remains. It is not only the circumstances that chill us, but the intimacy of their last hours. We know their names: Igor, Zinaida, Ludmila, Rustam, and the others, and we can see their faces frozen in film, smiling against the snow just days before the end. Their story is not anonymous. It feels personal, painfully human. There is something almost poetic about their tragedy, as if the mountain itself absorbed their final breath and keeps it still beneath the snow, whispering it to the wind for those who dare to listen. At night, when the Urals sleep under a curtain of frost, the site of the Dyatlov camp lies untouched. The tent's remnants are gone, but the silence remains exactly as it was. The same air, the same stillness, the same unknowable darkness. For those who visit, the feeling is unmistakable. The mountain does not speak, but watches. The air carries the echo of laughter, the faint sound of boots on snow, and then nothing at all. In the end, the Dyatlov Pass incident stands as more than a mystery of death. It is a meditation on the limits of understanding. It reminds us that nature is not cruel or kind. It simply is. We, who try to measure and explain it, bring our fears with us into the wilderness. The 9 hikers did not just vanish into the cold. They crossed a threshold into the timeless space where reason meets wonder. And so, their story remains unfinished. The snow falls again each year, covering the place where they lay, erasing their tracks as if to start the mystery anew. In the quiet, beneath layers of frost and silence, the mountain keeps its secret. The wind moves through the pines, soft and unhurried, and the world continues to ask the same question it has asked for decades: what truly happened on that frozen night? As the snowfall thickens and the echoes fade, the journey through disappearance continues. From icy peaks and lost hikers, we drift now into reflection, a pause in the story, where reason tries to bridge the gap between what is known and what forever escapes our grasp. The mind seeks meaning the way the body seeks warmth. After each mystery, after each silence left behind by the vanished, we search for patterns in the dark. It is human nature. This need to turn chaos into something that makes sense, to draw a fragile line between what is real and what is imagined. Yet, as the stories unfold, a quiet truth begins to surface. Not everything that disappears wishes to be explained. Some vanishings are not problems to be solved, but mirrors held up to our own longing for certainty. The cases of Roanoke, the Mary Celeste, Flight 19, and the Dyatlov hikers, each so different, each so far apart in time and place, seem to echo one another like distant chimes caught in the same wind. They remind us that disappearance wears many faces. Sometimes it comes with violence, sometimes with peace, and sometimes with nothing at all. But always, there is that same shadowed shape, a gap where answers should be, a pause in the rhythm of reality. Science and logic have tried again and again to fill that gap. Investigators with charts and instruments, explorers with notebooks and cameras, skeptics with calm explanations. Yet the closer one looks, the further the truth seems to drift. Perhaps that is why these stories endure, not because we fail to explain them, but because we need them to remain unexplained. The mystery itself becomes a kind of comfort, a reminder that the universe is still larger than we can measure. It is strange to think that absence can hold so much weight. A missing ship, an empty camp, a colony erased from a map. These are not just voids, they are invitations. They pull us in, asking us to imagine, to reconstruct, to empathize. When something disappears, it leaves behind more than silence. It leaves behind possibility. The mind begins to build worlds in that blank space, and those imagined worlds can sometimes feel more alive than the real one. The bridge between logic and the unknown is not a straight path, but a shifting mist. On one side stands the solid ground of reason, the desire to explain, to catalog, to name. On the other, the vast field of wonder, where shadows move softly and certainty dissolves. Most of us live somewhere in the middle, crossing back and forth without realizing it. We read the reports, but we also feel the pull of imagination. We speak of facts, but we dream of ghosts. Every mystery begins in the same way. Something known becomes unknown. Yet what follows is shaped not only by evidence, but by the people who seek to make sense of it. The investigator and the storyteller walk side by side, each searching for a truth that feels complete. But truth itself may not live in the facts. It may live in the tension between what we can prove and what we can feel. Perhaps that is why we return, night after night, to tales of the vanished. They are not just stories about loss. They are meditations on the boundaries of knowledge. They whisper that life is fragile, that time erases, and that we are all, in our own way, temporary. The calm voice that tells these stories is not trying to frighten us, but to soothe us, to remind us that mystery is not chaos, but another form of order hidden beneath the surface. And when we step back, the patterns begin to appear. Isolation, fear, the vastness of nature, the smallness of human life against it. Whether it is a ship adrift, a mountain storm, or a vanished civilization, each story touches that same chord, the meeting of courage and the unknown. It is not always tragedy that defines them, but the serenity that follows, the acceptance that some questions will never have answers, and that this, too, is a kind of peace. So we cross the bridge now, from the realm of individual stories into something wider. We move away from those who vanished by choice or chance, and toward the places that vanished altogether. Cultures, cities, and entire worlds that were once vibrant and full of life, now reduced to echoes and dust. The mystery expands from human lives to the life of humanity itself. Beyond the snow and the sea lies the desert, where cliffs rise out of silence and wind moves through abandoned stone dwellings. There, another story waits, a story not of one person, but of an entire people who disappeared, leaving behind only walls, carvings, and the gentle whisper of history's breath moving through empty homes. The desert has its own kind of silence. It is not empty. It hums with the slow rhythm of time itself, a vast heartbeat beneath the sand. In the American Southwest, Beneath cliffs carved by wind and centuries lies one of the most haunting vanishings in human history. Long before modern borders and names, a great civilization lived here, the ancestral Puebloans, often called the Anasazi. They built their homes into the very bones of the earth, into the high canyon walls and mesas suspended between heaven and stone. For centuries they thrived, leaving behind a legacy written not in words, but in architecture and mystery. And then, without war, without conquest, they were gone. Imagine the desert as it once was, alive with footsteps, with laughter echoing through the canyons, with the soft hum of daily life. Villages clung to cliff sides like nests, connected by ladders and paths carved from sandstone. In places like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, intricate dwellings rose in harmonious design, perfectly aligned with the movements of the sun and stars. Their builders understood balance, not only with nature, but with something greater, something spiritual. The air still carries traces of that order, as though the stones remember the hands that shaped them. Archaeologists have uncovered pottery, tools, and murals painted with deep pigments, reds and ochres that have resisted time's erosion. They have found kivas, circular ceremonial chambers built beneath the earth, where the people gathered for rituals, song, and storytelling. These rooms, cool and echoing, feel sacred even now. The ancestral Puebloans were astronomers, farmers, artists, and philosophers. They mapped the heavens on rock, aligning their great houses with solstices and lunar cycles. They understood the language of seasons and light. And yet, around the 13th century, they left their homes behind. The disappearance was not sudden, but gradual, a fading rather than a vanishing. By the late 1200s, the once thriving cities stood empty. The wind replaced voices. Fires went out, tools lay unused, and no single record was left to explain why. Some believe that years of drought drove the people to migrate in search of water. Others suggest internal conflict or the exhaustion of resources in a delicate desert ecosystem. There are theories of famine, social collapse, or even spiritual departure, a collective decision to move beyond a place that could no longer sustain them. But perhaps it was more than survival. The ancestral Puebloans did not see the world as something to conquer. They saw it as a living being, a sacred cycle. To them, movement may not have meant abandonment, but renewal. When the balance between humans and nature shifted, they may have listened and walked away, following ancient signs toward new homes further south and east. Their descendants, the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo peoples, still carry fragments of those traditions. In their songs and ceremonies, echoes of that migration still live. If you stand today in the ruins of Chaco Canyon at sunset, the silence feels thick, not lifeless, but watchful. The walls are worn smooth by centuries of wind, yet they still hold their shape. A single crow might pass overhead, its shadow gliding over the stone like memory. The air tastes of dust and age. It's easy to imagine that the people who once stood there simply stepped into another world, one not measured by time or distance. Their departure was not disappearance. It was transformation. The Anasazi story is not one of fear or loss, but of reverence. It invites reflection on how civilizations rise and fall, not through violence, but through the gentle turning of cycles. The desert, with its long silences, does not reveal what it knows. It buries and preserves in equal measure, hiding meaning within stillness. In that stillness, we are reminded that disappearance does not always mean death. Sometimes it means change. Sometimes it means listening to what the land is saying. For those who wander among the ruins, there is a strange peace. The air feels heavier near the kivas, as if filled with invisible presence. When the sun dips below the cliffs, the shadows lengthen and merge, and the canyon seems to breathe. It is not haunted, it is alive with memory. The desert night arrives without haste, carrying the scent of sage and the quiet hum of distant wind. The world slows down until even thought feels like an intrusion. The The story of the ancestral Puebloans lingers as an ancient whisper, that everything built by human hands is temporary, and everything that vanishes leaves behind something eternal. The mystery of their disappearance is not a question demanding an answer. It is an offering of perspective, a reminder that what fades from sight does not fade from existence. And as the last light of the canyon dissolves into darkness, the desert becomes an ocean of stars, each one reflecting the same sky they once studied so carefully. The line between heaven and earth blurs, as it always has in their sacred places. From here, the path leads deeper into the realm of lost worlds. Not those carved in stone, but those spoken of in legend. The next story drifts beyond archaeology and into the half-dream of myth, where a great island civilization once shone brightly before sinking into the sea, leaving behind not ruins, but a word that has echoed for thousands of years: Atlantis. Beneath the restless skin of the sea lies one of humanity's oldest and most enduring mysteries, a story that has traveled across centuries, whispered through every age in different tongues, always carrying the same haunting name: Atlantis. It is not merely a legend. It is a symbol, a riddle that reflects both our dreams of greatness and our fear of losing it all. Long before explorers mapped the world, long before satellites traced coastlines, there was already talk of a great island civilization, advanced beyond its time, swallowed whole by the ocean in a single day and night. The first mention of Atlantis came from Plato around 360 BCE in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias. He described it as a mighty empire that lay beyond the Pillars of Heracles, what we now call the Strait of Gibraltar. According to him, it was a land rich in beauty and knowledge, where architecture gleamed with precious metals and canals ran like veins through a living world of harmony and design. The people of Atlantis were said to be powerful, wise, and deeply connected to divine order. But as centuries passed, pride overtook balance. They grew greedy, their hearts swelling with ambition. And so, as the story goes, the gods struck them down, letting the sea rise and reclaim all they had built. Was it myth or memory? That question has haunted thinkers for millennia. To some, Plato's Atlantis was a moral parable, a warning against arrogance and the corruption of power. But others have wondered whether his tale held echoes of something real, some distant memory of a lost civilization washed away by cataclysm. Perhaps not an island of magic, but a forgotten culture remembered only through fragments and fear. The search for Atlantis has wandered across the world's oceans. In the cold depths off Spain, explorers have claimed to see structures beneath the waves, grids that might be streets, shadows that might be ruins. Near the Azores, others have found stones that seem too regular to be nature's work. Some point to Santorini, once shattered by volcanic fury, whose destruction may have inspired the legend. Others look to the Caribbean, the coast of Cuba, or the distant Antarctic ice. Atlantis, like a mirage, shifts each time we approach it. It is never in one place for long, because perhaps it was never about geography. It was about the shape of our own imagination. Still, there's a peculiar familiarity in the story. A flourishing world undone in an instant by nature's wrath or by its own hubris. The resonance is timeless. Civilizations rise, build, reach toward the sky, and then somehow fall. Atlantis becomes not just a story of the sea, but a mirror for every culture that has ever looked at its reflection and wondered how long beauty can last before it sinks. Divers who descend into the deep often speak of a silence unlike any on land. Down there, light bends, sound fades, and the sense of direction disappears. It is easy to believe for a moment that an entire city could hide in that silence, a city dreaming beneath miles of blue. The ocean guards its secrets with patience. It erases, polishes, buries. Even if Atlantis had existed, the sea would have long since made it her own, folding marble and metal into coral and sand. What fascinates us is not the proof, but the longing. We want to believe there was once a golden age when humanity lived in perfect balance with knowledge and nature, a paradise before pride. Atlantis speaks to that yearning. It tells us that somewhere behind the veil of time, there might have been a civilization that reached enlightenment and then fell, teaching the world a lesson it has yet to learn. The calm cadence of Plato's writing suggests he may have intended his tale as both truth and metaphor. Perhaps he wanted to preserve a fragment of something whispered to him by older traditions, stories from Egypt or Mesopotamia about floods and lost lands. Or perhaps he created Atlantis as a reflection of Athens itself. Brilliant, ambitious, vulnerable. The line between myth and memory is thin, and history often grows in the cracks between them. In the soft hours of night, when the world outside grows still and only the sound of your own breathing remains, it is easy to imagine the slow rhythm of the ocean as a lullaby from another time. Each wave might carry a voice, an echo of the vanished. Cities that once shimmered with gold and light may now be quiet, their towers inhabited by fish and coral, their streets buried beneath the drifting silt. The sea, ever gentle in its movements, is also a great keeper of stories. What makes Atlantis truly mysterious is not whether it existed, but why it refuses to disappear from our collective mind. The story returns again and again, through art, dreams, philosophies, even modern science fiction. It never fades because it touches something universal, our awareness of impermanence. We build towers, we craft empires, we seek progress. But beneath it all, we know that time and nature will one day reclaim everything. Atlantis is the shadow of that truth, both terrifying and strangely comforting. The myth also reminds us of another kind of disappearance, the loss of memory itself. Civilizations do not always vanish through destruction. Sometimes they fade through forgetfulness. The knowledge, the languages, the wisdom of those before us slip away until only fragments remain. In this sense, Atlantis may exist everywhere, wherever knowledge is lost, wherever silence follows song. And so, when the tides shift and the sea sighs beneath the moon, perhaps Atlantis is not a place at all, but a reflection on the surface of time. A reminder that beauty, power, and progress are fragile, and that every golden age must someday be surrendered to the deep. The ocean does not mourn what it takes. It keeps it, reshapes it, and turns it into something eternal. As we drift from the mythic sea back toward the known world, the thread of mystery remains unbroken. The vanished city leads us, gently, toward another kind of disappearance, one not born of water, but of time. A mystery not hidden beneath waves, but buried beneath soil and silence. From the lost cities of the sea, we turn our gaze now to the lost cities of the earth, places once alive with sound and breath, now reclaimed by jungle, sand, and wind. There are places on this earth where time no longer moves forward. The air hangs heavy with memory, and every leaf, every stone, seems to whisper of a life that once pulsed through empty streets. In the stillness of these forgotten cities, the line between presence and absence dissolves. We are left standing in the threshold, between the living and the long gone. Among these places, none speak more softly or more powerfully than the ruins of ancient civilizations swallowed by time and the elements. They are history's way of reminding us that nothing built by human hands lasts forever. Imagine a city once filled with music and laughter, the sound of trade echoing through market squares, the scent of cooking fires rising into warm evening air. Imagine temples gleaming under sunlight, kings and priests walking along polished stone paths. Then imagine all of it disappearing, brick by brick, life by life, until only silence remains. Nature, patient and eternal, waits for a moment to return. Vines creep over walls, roots split the foundations, rain smooths away the carvings. What once was human becomes once more a part of the earth. Take the jungles of Central America. There, beneath canopies of green so thick they block out the sky, lie the remnants of the Maya, a civilization of astronomers, architects, and poets. They charted the stars, built cities of perfect geometry, and left behind a calendar that stretched across eternity. Cities like Tikal and Palenque once thrived with tens of thousands of people, but by the time European explorers arrived, they had been reclaimed by the forest. The Maya did not vanish entirely. Their descendants still live, but their great urban heart simply fell silent. No one knows why. Was it drought? War? Disease? Or did they, like the ancestral Puebloans, choose to leave when the land could no longer sustain them? The ruins breathe a strange kind of peace. As sunlight filters through leaves, it paints shifting patterns on moss-covered temples. Parrots call from the treetops. Monkeys move across broken stairways, and the jungle hums with quiet life. It feels as though the Maya are still there, unseen but ever present, their voices mingling with the rustling of leaves. The forest is not their grave, it is their veil. Far across the ocean, in the sands of Africa, another city lies buried, Timbuktu. Once a center of knowledge and trade, it drew scholars and merchants from across the continent. Its libraries overflowed with manuscripts. Its scholars studied the stars, medicine, law, and philosophy. For a moment in time, it was the intellectual heart of the world. But shifting trade routes and invading armies changed everything. The sands crept in, slow and silent, swallowing streets and stories alike. Today, only fragments remain, a few ancient mosques, a handful of libraries that still guard fragile manuscripts, and a silence that speaks louder than any words. And in the jungles of Cambodia, Angkor what rises like a dream from the mist. Once the beating heart of the Khmer Empire, it was built as a city of gods and kings, a mirror of heaven on earth. Its towers and causeways stretch in perfect symmetry, each stone carved with devotion. But the empire that built it faded, its cities overtaken by roots and vines. For centuries, the jungle hid its temples, until explorers stumbled upon them again, astonished by their size and beauty. Now, at dawn, the temple glows with gold light, and for a moment, time folds in on itself. You can almost hear the sound of ancient prayers carried by the morning air. What ties all these lost cities together is not merely their disappearance, but the serenity of their afterlife. In vanishing, they have become eternal. They no longer belong to their creators. They belong to the earth, to history, to anyone who listens. Their stories remind us that civilizations, like people, are born, grow, and fade, leaving behind only traces, stone, song, and silence. There is a humility in this cycle. The Maya watched the stars. The Khmer built temples to eternity. The scholars of Timbuktu sought to preserve wisdom forever. And yet, everything they built now exists as echoes. But perhaps that is the truest kind of immortality. Though their cities fell, their knowledge still flows quietly through time, carried in books, in oral traditions, in the very shape of the world they helped create. Standing before the ruins of any ancient city, you cannot help but feel a stillness settle over you. It is not sadness, but awe. The world feels vast, and we, temporary, passing through. The air vibrates with the knowledge that countless lives once filled this space, that their dreams were as vivid as ours, their fears as real. And then they were gone, their voices blending into the hum of nature. There is comfort, too, in knowing that even in disappearance, beauty endures. The carvings of Angkor, the steps of Machu Picchu, the stele of Tikal, all remain, softened by time, glowing gently in the light. They are no longer monuments to power, but to impermanence. The quiet they hold is not empty, it is sacred. It speaks to the continuity between what is lost and what remains. As night falls over these ancient places, the jungle stirs and the wind moves softly through the stones. The ruins seem to breathe, as if the past has merely shifted form, still alive in another way. The stars above are the same ones the Maya watched. the same ones that shone over Angkor and Timbuktu. Time folds upon itself like a curtain, and for a moment, everything feels connected, past and present, life and loss, creation and decay. From the jungles and deserts, our journey now turns inward again, from the ruins that the earth reclaims to the mysteries that the human mind creates. For not all disappearances are physical. Some happen within the unseen spaces of consciousness, memory, and belief. As we leave behind the echoes of vanished cities, we step into the realm of the spiritual unknown, where disappearance takes on a different form altogether, and what is lost may not be gone, but waiting to be understood. Even when stone and sand reclaim their spaces, disappearance continues to shape the human experience in ways less tangible than ruins and vanished cities. Some mysteries are not of geography, but of the human mind, phenomena that slip through our understanding like shadows, leaving behind questions instead of answers. It is here, in the unseen, that our fascination with vanishing takes a different form. The missing are not always lost to storms, to snow, or to time. Sometimes they vanish in ways that defy logic, leaving only whispers, photographs, and fading memories. One of the most enduring of these modern vanishings is the case of the Somerton man, found dead on an Australian beach in 1948. A man, perfectly preserved in mystery, washed ashore at Somerton Beach near Adelaide, his body oddly arranged, as if asleep, peaceful yet eerie. The coroner could find no obvious cause of death, no wounds, no signs of struggle. In his pockets, nothing but an inscription, a tiny scrap of paper reading Tamam, should, meaning ended, or finished. Even today, decades later, his identity remains unknown, his life as invisible as the tide that carried him. The Somerton man's disappearance is a paradox. He was present, there on the sand, tangible and real, but his existence eludes every attempt to anchor it to history. No passport, no family, no record of his movements. The objects around him, the carefully folded scrap of paper, hint at a story, but leave us grasping for context. Every investigation only deepens the sense of absence. The man is known, and yet entirely unknown. He is a ghost who once breathed, and who continues to breathe in our imagination. These disappearances are different from the vanished civilizations or missing ships. They are intimate, they are personal, and they remind us that mystery does not always require grandeur to grip the imagination. A single life, a single disappearance, can inspire as much fascination as entire cities lost to time. The human mind craves resolution, yet in the absence of it, we create stories, theories, and legends, some logical, others wild, all attempting to make sense of the silence left behind. The Somerton man has inspired hundreds of theories, espionage, secret identities, even coded messages from foreign agents. Yet the calm, poetic truth is often simpler. Something, somewhere, ended a life quietly, leaving no witness, no sound, no trace. That quietness is what unsettles us. It is not the violence, but the stillness, the invisible thread connecting life and disappearance that lingers. And as with so many mysteries, the more time passes, the more the unknown becomes a space for reflection, imagination, and wonder. Other modern vanishings mirror this quiet strangeness. Consider Amelia Earhart, the pioneering aviator who vanished over the Pacific in 1937. Unlike Flight 19, her path was planned, her skill unmatched. Yet she, too, disappeared into an expanse of water, sky, and uncertainty. Searches turned up little, a few pieces of evidence, tantalizing but inconclusive. Her disappearance remains a testament to the vastness of the world, to the limits of human reach, and to the quiet persistence of mystery. Even as the decades pass, her story floats like a soft echo across the Pacific, a reminder that mastery over nature is never complete. Then there are disappearances closer to home, smaller in scale, but no less profound. People who vanish in the night, in the forest, or even within bustling cities, leaving only traces of daily life. A coffee cup left on a counter, a phone lying in the street, a chair still warm. These vanishings are daily miracles of absence, moments when the ordinary becomes uncanny, and when the familiar suddenly holds a space for the unknown. Perhaps what makes these modern mysteries so compelling is their duality. They are at once ordinary and extraordinary. They are reminders that disappearance does not always need grandeur to be meaningful. A life gone missing touches more directly on the fragility of existence than any lost city or vanished ship. It asks us to reckon with impermanence, to accept that not all questions are meant to be answered. There's also a kind of intimacy in these stories, a quiet connection between observer and the vanished. In imagining who the Somerton Man was, or where Amelia Earhart went, or the life behind any sudden absence, we stretch our empathy, our curiosity, our imagination. The unknown becomes a space for reflection, not just on the mystery itself, but on the nature of life, choice, and mortality. And so, the world is filled with silent witnesses. Beaches, forests, streets, and skies hold secrets that will never be fully revealed. We may never know the Somerton Man's name, Amelia Earhart's final thoughts, or the paths of those lost without trace. Yet the absence itself speaks louder than any evidence could. It is a meditation, a lullaby of questions without answers, guiding the listener gently into reflection on the ephemeral nature of human existence. As we leave the modern vanishings behind, the journey turns outward again toward places and times where entire lives, civilizations, and cultures have been erased from the map. From intimate human disappearances, we drift back into the grandeur of history's vanishing worlds, connecting the personal with the universal. Silence, after all, is the thread that binds every disappearance together, whether it lies in stone, sea, snow, or memory. The thread of silence that runs through human history grows stronger as we move into the vanished civilizations of antiquity, places where entire cultures seem to dissolve, leaving only fragments and shadows. One such place lies along the banks of the Indus River, where nearly 5,000 years ago, a people built some of the most advanced cities of the ancient world: Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, and others now collectively called the Indus Valley Civilization. These were thriving urban centers with grid-like streets, complex drainage systems, and evidence of trade reaching across continents. Yet by around 1900 BCE, these cities were abandoned. The reasons remain unknown, and their disappearance continues to puzzle archaeologists and historians alike. Imagine walking through Mohenjo-daro at its height. Bustling marketplaces filled with merchants calling out their wares, artisans shaping clay into pots and seals, children running through narrow streets, while women carry water from communal wells. The hum of life is everywhere. People speak in an unknown script that we still cannot fully decipher, their daily rituals etched in clay and stone. And then, as if by some invisible tide, that vibrant existence slowly fades. Homes are left empty, streets fall silent, and the grand baths and granaries are left to the wind and sun. No catastrophic evidence, no burned villages, no signs of invasion suggests why they vanished. Scholars have suggested drought, flooding, or a shifting river as potential causes. Yet each theory leaves questions unanswered. Why abandon cities that were so carefully constructed? Why leave behind artifacts of daily life, tools, and even food? Unlike civilizations destroyed by war or conquest, the Indus cities appear to have simply been emptied, as if the people walked away quietly, carrying their stories in their minds and hearts, but leaving little physical trace. This disappearance is unlike the sudden vanishings of ships or expeditions. It is a slow, silent fading, almost imperceptible, but ultimately complete. The scale is staggering. Entire populations, sophisticated enough to build thriving urban centers, vanished in a manner that defies clear explanation. And yet, they left an indelible mark on history. Their streets, their art, their objects, all speak to a civilization of remarkable intelligence and organization. In the ruins, we hear echoes of human life long gone, whispers of culture, innovation, and daily rhythm. The mystery deepens when we consider their undeciphered script. Thousands of inscribed seals have been found, yet no one has cracked their code. Each symbol hints at knowledge, communication, stories perhaps mundane, perhaps profound. And yet, we can only guess at their meaning. In these empty streets and silent cities, the Indus Valley people continue to speak through fragments, tantalizing us with glimpses of a culture we can see but cannot fully understand. Their absence magnifies their presence, creating a tension between what exists and what has been lost. It is this tension that fascinates us most. The Indus Valley civilization vanished without violence, without fanfare, leaving behind only evidence of life carefully structured and abruptly halted. Their disappearance is like a deep exhale of time itself, a quiet surrender to forces we may never fully comprehend. And yet, in their ruins, we find not despair, but awe. For even in absence, there is a form of immortality. Every brick, every well, every carved seal is a testament to ingenuity and the persistence of memory. Consider the Great Bath of Mohenjo-daro, a structure so carefully engineered that it would rival modern constructions. Its steps descend into water, perhaps used for ritual cleansing or communal gathering. Today, it lies empty, cracked by centuries, yet it radiates calm precision and the echoes of hands that shaped it. This is not just architecture. It is a meditation on permanence and impermanence, a bridge between the known and the unknown. The vanished cities of the Indus Valley, like other lost civilizations, force us to confront the fragility of human achievement. They remind us that even the most advanced societies are at the mercy of time, environment, and forces beyond control. Yet there is also beauty in their silence. In the still streets and empty homes, in the faded granaries and abandoned wells, there's a kind of quiet poetry, a story of life lived, knowledge created, and then quietly passed into the unknown. As we step back from the ruins of Mohenjo-daro and Harappa, the pattern becomes clear. Across time and geography, civilizations rise, flourish, and sometimes vanish without leaving clear explanations. They leave questions embedded in the soil, whispers in the stones, and a timeless lesson. The human life, no matter how intricate or abundant, is temporary. Their disappearance is not failure. It is part of the rhythm of existence, a rhythm we observe in awe and contemplation. From the Indus Valley, our journey continues across continents, seeking the quiet spaces where civilizations disappear into the mist of history. These vanishings are not always dramatic, not always sudden, but they all carry the same resonance. They remind us that absence can be as profound as presence, that the voids left behind hold as much power as the structures themselves. And in contemplating these silent cities, we prepare to move to another corner of the ancient world, where civilization rose along the Nile, and the desert itself would one day claim its monuments, leaving mystery in the sands, the pharaohs of Egypt and their vanished splendor. The Nile flows like a silver thread through the desert, carrying with it stories older than writing, older than memory. Along its banks, some of the world's most magnificent monuments were built, temples, pyramids, and cities of stone that shimmered under the sun and bore witness to millennia of human ambition. Ancient Egypt is familiar to us, its image etched into the imagination through films, books, and school lessons. Yet beneath this familiarity lies a profound mystery. Despite all the wealth of knowledge about their culture, much of ancient Egypt remains a puzzle. Entire temples are buried, tombs remain unexcavated, and countless artifacts lie hidden under sand that shifts with the wind, as if guarding secrets the world is not yet ready to hear. Consider the pyramids of Giza, the last surviving wonder of the ancient world. We marvel at their scale, precision, and endurance, but their construction still raises questions. How did an ancient civilization, without modern machinery, move stones weighing tons with such accuracy? How did they organize labor, resources, and logistics to achieve feats that baffle engineers even today? And beyond the mechanics, the purpose of some structures remains elusive. While the pyramids served as tombs for pharaohs, they were also symbolic representations of divine order, cosmic alignment, and eternal life. Yet, even in their glory, they hint at stories lost to time, stories of rituals, beliefs, and lives once vivid, now vanished. The allure of mystery is strongest in the desert tombs. Valley after valley holds sealed chambers, their entrances guarded by shadows and centuries of sand. Some contain treasures, but others hold only silence. And some, once opened, reveal puzzles that challenge understanding. Mummies in unexpected positions, inscriptions in unknown scripts, and corridors whose design confounds logic. Archaeologists and historians can offer explanations, yet the sense of wonder persists because what is revealed is often only a fraction of what remains hidden. Not all vanishings are the result of time or decay. Egypt's history is marked by deliberate erasure as well. Pharaohs sometimes attempted to rewrite history, to obscure the memory of predecessors they found undesirable. Statues were defaced, names chiseled from walls, records destroyed. Even monuments, so carefully crafted, were not immune to the human desire to erase or redefine the past. In this way, disappearance is not always accidental. It is sometimes intentional, a reminder that power and memory are intertwined. Then there are the lost cities along the Nile and in the desert, settlements that once thrived and now exist only in fragments. One of the most fascinating examples is the city of Tanis, a bustling center during the Third Intermediate Period. For centuries, it lay buried under shifting sands, forgotten until its rediscovery in the 20th century. And yet, for all its excavation, many secrets remain. Artifacts hint at dynasties, trade networks, and rituals, but the full story is incomplete. Whole chapters of human life, once vibrant, now speak only in glimpses. The desert itself contributes to this sense of disappearance. It preserves and conceals simultaneously, swallowing cities and tombs while keeping their essence intact. Wind erodes inscriptions, sand drifts over streets, yet the stones endure, silent witnesses to centuries of change. There is a rhythm to this vanishing, a slow, deliberate swallowing by nature, balanced by the endurance of stone and memory. It is as if the desert itself decides what to reveal and what to hide, a keeper of secrets older than any king or dynasty. Egyptian mythology itself reflects an awareness of impermanence and the fragility of life. Stories of death, resurrection, and the journey of the soul across the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, speak to a culture that lived intimately with both existence and absence. In their art, hieroglyphs, and tombs, we see a civilization preoccupied not only with living but with preserving memory. Yet, despite all their efforts, many aspects of their society have been lost. Language, rituals, and practices have vanished or shifted in meaning, leaving behind tantalizing fragments that challenge modern understanding. Even today, Egypt continues to reveal and conceal its mysteries. New discoveries are made in tombs, pyramids, and desert sands, often altering previous assumptions. Each excavation, each unearthing, reminds us of how much remains unknown. Yet in this pursuit, there is a calmness, a poetic rhythm. The stories emerge slowly, like sunlight over dunes, offering glimpses without demanding finality. We learn to accept that some knowledge will always remain beyond reach, and that this very uncertainty enhances the allure of the vanished world. In contemplating Egypt's disappearing civilizations, one senses a connection to the broader theme of disappearance across history. Cities vanish, individuals vanish, even entire cultures fade, yet the traces they leave continue to speak. The Nile itself, eternal yet ever-changing, is a metaphor for the flow of memory and time, a river that carries both what has been and what has been lost. From the deserts of Egypt, our journey of vanishing civilizations begins to turn inward, moving from monuments and cities to the vanishing of knowledge itself. How do ideas, stories, and cultures disappear even when their physical remnants endure? What becomes a memory when it is forgotten, misinterpreted, or lost to time? In exploring these questions, we find that disappearance is not only a matter of stone, sand, or flesh. It is also a matter of thought, belief, and consciousness. Memory is fragile, more so than stone or sand, yet it carries the weight of entire worlds. While cities crumble and empires fade, the disappearance of knowledge and culture leaves a different kind of void, one that is invisible but no less profound. Across time, countless libraries, manuscripts, and oral traditions have vanished, taking with them the stories, wisdom, and understanding of generations. The loss is silent, often unnoticed at first, until centuries later we glimpse the gaps, missing pages, erased names, or entire civilizations remembered only through the faintest echoes. Consider the Library of Alexandria, a name that has become synonymous with lost knowledge. This repository of ancient thought once held scrolls and texts from every corner of the known world. Philosophers, astronomers, mathematicians, and poets poured their ideas into its halls. And yet, over time, fire, neglect, and conquest reduced this treasure to ashes. The ideas themselves did not always survive, lost forever in smoke and dust. What could we have learned? How would our understanding of the world have changed had those scrolls endured? The library's destruction is more than a historical footnote. It is a meditation on the impermanence of human memory and the fragility of recorded thought. The disappearance of knowledge is not limited to grand libraries. Oral traditions, passed down through generations, can vanish quietly, leaving cultures bereft of their own stories. Languages die when their speakers vanish, taking with them unique perspectives on life, environment, and the cosmos. Indigenous knowledge of plants, animals, and medicine has disappeared with countless communities, leaving the world poorer in ways that cannot be measured. Sometimes, the vanishing is gradual, a subtle erosion of memory, replaced by dominant cultures or forgotten in the passage of time. Other times, it is sudden, forced by war, displacement, or calamity. Even in the modern age, we see the same pattern. Early recordings, films, and photographs, once considered permanent, can deteriorate, leaving only fragments. Data stored on obsolete formats becomes unreadable, and stories recorded on paper or film can decay beyond recognition. Each loss is a reminder that nothing, not even human thought, is truly permanent. Every forgotten poem, untransmitted story, or erased account adds to the quiet weight of absence. There is something haunting in the disappearance of knowledge because it is not always tangible. Unlike ruins that can be touched or artifacts that can be examined, lost ideas leave no trace except the void they create. Historians, scholars, and explorers try to reconstruct what is gone, piecing together fragments like a mosaic with missing tiles. Every attempt offers insight, but also emphasizes how much has been erased. The human imagination works to fill the gaps, inventing narratives, speculating about lost wisdom. And in doing so, we participate in the act of remembering that which no longer exists. Some vanishings of thought are deliberate. Tyrants and conquerors have historically burned books, silenced scholars, and suppressed ideas that threaten power or orthodoxy. The knowledge lost through censorship is especially poignant, for it is not nature or time that decides what disappears, but human will. Entire philosophical schools, religious interpretations, and scientific methods have been erased in this way, leaving future generations to wonder what could have been known. Yet even in loss, there is a strange persistence. Ideas survive in unexpected ways, through fragments quoted elsewhere, through influence on later thinkers, or through myths and legends that encode forgotten truths. The shadow of what was once known lingers, guiding the curious across centuries, calling them to rediscover, reinterpret, and reflect. Disappearance, in this sense, is not absolute. It exists as a space for exploration, imagination, and quiet contemplation. The vanishing of knowledge also mirrors the vanishing of civilizations themselves. A city may disappear, but when its texts and teachings survive, it continues to speak across time. Conversely, a civilization may endure physically, yet if its knowledge is lost, it is as if it has vanished in spirit. This duality reinforces the idea that disappearance is not solely physical. It can be intellectual, cultural, and emotional. It resides in the gap between presence and understanding. Meditating on the vanished libraries and lost languages, one begins to see a pattern. Across history, everything humans create, cities, empires, art, stories, even ideas, is impermanent. The calm realization is that disappearance is part of the natural rhythm of life, a necessary balance that gives value to what remains. Every rediscovery, every fragment found, becomes precious precisely because of what has been lost. And so, the disappearance of knowledge invites us to listen, not only to what is recorded, but to what is absent. It asks us to be attentive to silence, to the spaces between words, to the voids where wisdom once lived. In doing so, we honor what has vanished, preserving it in thought and imagination, carrying it forward even when the originals are forever gone. From the lost libraries and forgotten languages, our reflection widens further. Disappearance is not merely a matter of cities, civilizations, or ideas. It is also the personal, quiet vanishing of those we have known, loved, or encountered. Memory, once vivid, fades. People depart, sometimes suddenly, sometimes imperceptibly. In these intimate vanishings, the emotional weight of absence becomes palpable, connecting the historical and the human into a single continuum of reflection and wonder. The most intimate disappearances are often the ones that touch us most deeply. Unlike lost civilizations or vanished cities, these are the lives we have known, the faces that have walked beside us, the voices that have filled our days with sound. They're the people who leave without explanation, who fade slowly from memory, or who depart suddenly, leaving a silence that can feel deafening. In these vanishings, the absence is not measured in stone or sand, but in the quiet spaces left behind, the empty chair at a table, the unfilled bed, the echo of laughter that will never return. Grief, in these moments, becomes a meditation. It is a stillness that forces reflection on impermanence, on the fragile nature of existence. We realize that life, no matter how vivid, is temporary. Each interaction, each shared moment, carries the weight of fleetingness. The loved ones who vanish do not always leave clues, explanations, or closure. Instead, they leave us with fragments of memory, pieces of story, and the vast, unanswerable question of what lies beyond their disappearance. The human mind, when confronted with such vanishings, searches for patterns. We tell ourselves stories to make sense of a loss. Perhaps they were taken by chance, or circumstance, or fate. Perhaps they moved on willingly, seeking a life unknown to us. The imagination fills the gaps with both comfort and dread, offering scenarios that soothe or unsettle. In this space, disappearance becomes a mirror of our own fears and desires, reflecting the uncertainty that shadows every human life. Even when explanations come, they often do little to calm the restless mind. Missing persons cases may be solved, tragedies accounted for, but the emotional void often remains. The disappearance has altered reality, leaving a permanent mark on those left behind. The ordinary rhythm of life is disrupted, and the quiet questions, why, how, linger long after the facts are known. Silence, in this context, carries as much weight as knowledge. It is the pause between presence and understanding, a space where grief and wonder intertwine. Across cultures and histories, such disappearances are marked with ritual, remembrance, and storytelling. Communities gather to honor those who vanish, preserving their names and deeds in memory, song, and ceremony. Monuments are erected, prayers offered, and stories passed down through generations. Even when the physical presence is gone, the human spirit seeks to keep a connection alive. Memory becomes both sanctuary and bridge, a way to engage with absence while preserving the essence of what was lost. There is also a quiet lesson in these vanishings. They remind us of the impermanence of all things and the preciousness of the present moment. Relationships, experiences, and lives are fleeting. In the face of disappearance, the mundane becomes sacred. The shared meal, the whispered conversation, the touch of a hand. Awareness of impermanence heightens sensitivity to existence itself, cultivating a calm reverence for life and connection. In the night, when the world grows still, absence becomes palpable. A quiet home, an empty street, or the fading echoes of someone's voice can evoke the same contemplative state as a deserted ruin or a forgotten city. The personal vanishing resonates because it is immediate and intimate. We are reminded that disappearance is universal. It occurs on the scale of empires and civilizations, but also in our own lives, quietly and persistently. Yet within this reflection, there is also a gentle comfort. Even in absence, the influence of those who vanish remains. Their teachings, love, and presence in memory continue to shape our lives. They are part of the threads that compose who we are, subtly guiding, inspiring, and reminding us of life's fragility and beauty. Disappearance, in this sense, is not an ending but a transformation, a shift from the physical into memory, imagination, and enduring influence. Meditating on the vanishing of loved ones allows us to connect all forms of disappearance, from the personal to the historical, from the individual to the civilizational. Each echoes the other, reminding us that impermanence is the rhythm of existence. The quiet of absence is not empty. It is filled with reflection, with memory, with the poetic awareness of life's fleeting, luminous nature. As the night deepens, we recognize a pattern running through every story of disappearance. Cities fade, civilizations collapse, knowledge is lost, explorers vanish, and loved ones depart. But in every case, the silence that follows carries meaning. It teaches us to listen, to observe, to honor what remains, and to appreciate the delicate balance between presence and absence. In doing so, we find calm, even in the face of mystery, and a gentle reminder that life's transience is what gives it depth, resonance, and beauty. In the stillness of the final hour, after the names and faces have faded into the folds of time, the story drifts toward quiet reflection. The world of the vanished lingers around us like mist at dawn, neither here nor gone, but suspended in a delicate, luminous balance. The mysteries we have followed through centuries of history, the lost colonies, the silent ships, the vanished travelers, have not yielded final answers. And perhaps that is why they remain with us. Each disappearance, in its own way, has become a lantern glowing faintly in the dark, showing that what is unknown is not always something to fear, but something to listen to. There is a strange kind of peace in uncertainty. When we first encounter the stories of the missing, our minds immediately begin to work, to measure, to guess. We want to fill the silence with explanation, to impose a pattern upon the chaos. But as the hours pass and the questions deepen, another instinct awakens, the quiet acceptance that not everything can or should be solved. Sometimes, the act of wondering itself becomes the point. The listener can almost feel the weight of centuries pressing gently against the heart, whispering that life's greatest truths are rarely loud, and that the universe often speaks in absence. Across history, disappearance has always been more than loss. It is transformation. A person leaves, and in their place rises a legend. A ship sinks, and a myth is born from the waves. A city crumbles, and from its ruins grows a story that will outlive its stones. In this slow unfolding of time, we see how the unknown gives shape to imagination. The things we cannot prove, we keep alive through storytelling, turning absence into narrative and narrative into memory. That is how the world remembers. That is how the vanished are never truly gone. Picture, for a moment, the lighthouse on Eilean Moor still standing against the sea. The wind hums softly through its corridors, brushing over empty chairs, the journal left open on a desk, the eternal rhythm of waves below. The keepers have vanished, but their presence remains in the careful order they left behind. The lit lamp, the folded oilskins, the half-written notes. Their absence has become part of the island's rhythm. Every gust of salt air carries their story. Every crash of wave repeats their names. The world does not forget easily. It absorbs, it reshapes, it tells the story again in softer tones. And somewhere in the Arctic night, the wreck of the Erebus rests beneath the ice. It sleeps, preserved by the cold, surrounded by the stillness of centuries. When divers discovered its timbers, they found not a shipwreck, but a time capsule, an echo of courage and confusion sealed in frost. Those men, lost to snow and silence, continue to speak to us not through words, but through the enduring stillness of the place where they fell. They remind us that every attempt to conquer the unknown is also a conversation with mystery itself, and that even in failure, there is profound meaning. History's vanishings remind us that time has its own voice, patient and unsentimental. It erases and reveals at its own pace, as if guarding the balance between knowing and wondering. In a world where every second is tracked, every movement recorded, and every corner mapped, the idea that something or someone can still slip quietly beyond reach feels almost sacred. It invites us to slow down, to remember that not all truths can be captured by light, and that darkness too has its wisdom. Imagine standing beneath a star-filled sky. Above you, 1,000 points of light shimmer, their origins long vanished, their glow only a memory traveling through space. Some of the stars you see no longer exist. Their light is a ghost, a disappearance in progress. Yet we still draw comfort from their shine. So too with the stories of the lost. Their light travels on, even when the source is gone. We keep them alive in conversation, in quiet thought, in that moment before sleep when the mind drifts between presence and absence. Perhaps that is the heart of mystery itself, that the unknown and the known are not enemies, but companions. We need both. Certainty builds our world, but uncertainty gives it depth. Without the unanswered, life would lose its shimmer, its endless horizon of possibility. The calm narrator might remind the listener here that wonder is not the opposite of knowledge. It is its beginning. Every discovery starts with a question, and every question lives first in mystery. To live comfortably among mysteries is to be fully alive to the vastness of existence. Think of the people who vanished and left behind more than just confusion. Amelia Earhart, who soared into the sky and dissolved into myth. Her name has never stopped echoing across the Pacific, her courage frozen in time. She reminds us that vanishing is not always failure. It can also be transcendence. The same skies that swallowed her also immortalized her. She is now part of the horizon itself, her absence a symbol of eternal flight. It is the paradox of disappearance. The act of leaving becomes the most lasting form of presence. Even the ancient civilizations that slipped quietly from history, the Maya, the Indus, the ancestral Puebloans, left behind traces that speak not of death, but of continuity. Their temples, carvings, and roads still breathe faintly through the soil, reminding us that no culture truly disappears. It transforms, disperses, merges into others. The human story is never cleanly divided between presence and absence. It is a flowing current, always moving, always reshaping itself. We are part of that same current, living our small moments before we too are carried downstream into the gentle anonymity of time. As the documentary draws to its close, the tone grows even softer, as if preparing the listener for sleep. The narrator's voice slows, the words becoming a kind of rhythm, a lullaby of reflection. The mysteries we have shared no longer feel threatening or strange. They feel familiar, woven into the fabric of what it means to be alive. Disappearance is not an interruption of life's story. It is part of its natural rhythm, as inevitable and graceful as dusk following day. The voice might say, "Every life is a candle, and every story a flame." When the light goes out, the warmth remains in the air. It lingers, unseen but felt, shaping those who pass through its glow. In this way, the vanished never leave us. They simply change form, becoming part of the invisible architecture of the world, the quiet weight of the past that holds us steady as we move forward. The more we learn, the more we realize how small we are, and yet how vast our capacity for wonder remains. We live surrounded by absences, the moments that slip away before we notice, the people we lose touch with, the histories that are never written down. But each of these absences leaves behind an imprint, a lesson in tenderness, a reminder that we are temporary guests in a world of infinite stories. The missing remind us to look closer, to listen more carefully, to treat what we have with reverence, for it too will one day pass into silence. As the music deepens, we can imagine all the vanished souls we've spoken of, walking through fog, sailing through stars, standing at the edges of their own mysteries. The Roanoke settlers, their footprints fading into sand. The hikers of Dyatlov Pass, bathed in moonlight on the mountain. The crew of the Mary Celeste, still adrift on an invisible sea. They are neither gone nor present. They are part of the dream that humanity carries forward. In the quiet hours of night, their stories breathe again through us, each retelling keeping them gently alive. There is a serenity that comes with releasing the need for resolution. The mind, so used to closing loops and tying ends, finally rests when it accepts that some threads are meant to remain loose. The unknown, once feared, becomes a companion, soft-spoken, mysterious, but kind. It humbles us, reminding us that we are participants in something larger, a story whose ending we will never see, but whose beauty we can still feel. In the end, what remains is connection, the invisible thread that binds all who have ever lived, vanished or not. To disappear is not to cease, but to merge with everything else. The forest absorbs the hiker, the ocean cradles the sailor, the air carries the aviator. Each returns to the elements from which they came. The world holds them all, tenderly, without judgment, without sound. And through that holding, through that silence, we are reminded of our own belonging. The closing voice would speak now in a hush, like a secret shared with the dark. Maybe the mystery is not about them at all. Maybe it is about us, about how we respond to the silence, how we fill the spaces left behind, how we learn to live gently with what we do not understand. That is where the beauty lies, not in finding, but in feeling. The unfound is not empty. It is full of possibility, of wonder, of meaning waiting just beyond our reach. The music fades, and with it, the world seems to slow. The listener can almost hear the soft heartbeat of time beneath the quiet. The story has no final twist, no revelation, no last-minute solution. Only calm, only stillness. The mysteries remain, as they always have, scattered like stars across the vast dark sky. And we, small and brief, look up and find comfort in their light, because we, too, are part of that same mystery, destined to vanish, yet forever part of something endless. The final words come almost as a breath. Some stories are not meant to be solved. They are meant to be felt, and in feeling them, we keep them alive. Then silence, gentle, peaceful, infinite. The light fades, the music exhales one final note, and the night folds over itself in quiet understanding. And so the documentary ends, not with the sound of closure, but with the soft hum of eternity, the sense that the world is full of disappearances, but never truly empty. Every vanishing, every unanswered question, every shadow left behind is part of the same luminous pattern, the beauty of the unfound, glowing softly forever in the dark.